I have been instrumental since 1993. I was elected in 1992 to serve District 40 in the state Senate, which now encompasses Doñana and Otero County. Since 1993, I have been instrumental in introducing legislation and passing many pieces of legislation that have brought about much in the way of election reform. But there are many more issues that need to be discussed, that need to be dealt with, and that really need to be considered. Probably the number one issue in my mind right now is that voter ID, which 85% of New Mexicans in polls have said they want, has been an issue that I've worked on since 1993. That is one of the election reform issues that I believe a Secretary of State who understands, who truly understands the procedure, the processes that we follow in the elections, in conduct of elections, and how elections affect New Mexicans. That is the number one issue, is voter ID, and a real photo voter ID requirement. Not, as I call it, not the watered down version that is in legislation currently today. So in addition to that, there have been many election reform bills that have passed, and including this last legislative session, that dealt with certainly the maintenance of the voting systems and whose responsibility it was for storage and maintenance, and whether it was the states or whether it was the counties. Those kinds of things have passed this last session and been signed into law in our new legislation. But I think voter ID is probably the first and foremost that I would work on.
Continuous audit reforms. Currently, we went through the automatic random audits, and it's showing that the paper ballot system is working. Counties have come out exactly after the audits were performed. For instance, Taos, Valencia, and Bernalillo County, being the largest county in the state of New Mexico, registered voters had an 11-vote difference. That is showing that the paper ballot system is working and it's accurate. And I think now for the future, because of budget constraints, one of the reforms that needs to be studied and looked at is the possibility of implementing convenience centers. I did assist the city of Rio Rancho for their city election. We used convenience centers rather than polling locations for election day, and it'll cut down the cost dramatically by not having to hire all of the presiding judges and the whole team for election day. So I would say we need to start, as I have already cut back on the budgets to run elections, because the entire state is in a budget constraint, and I think that would be one of my number one priorities, to look at convenience centers for election day. And it's similar to early voting sites. Convenience centers means you go in and you can vote your ballot, plus it'll cut down. Right now we have the ballot by demand. We print your ballot rather than pre-printing ballots. Well, now we can do the exact same for election day. For the primary, we just saved $303,000 using ballot by demand. It's called auto vote, and if we move to convenience centers, we would save in the thousands of dollars and less people having to be hired. And I think it'd be more convenient because anyone could stop at any convenience center and vote their ballot. Plus, it also will open up doors. What's been asked, should we or should we not implement same-day registration? Okay, that came up during the last session, and I met with several senators and representatives, and I did not support it due to the fact that we are not computer connected for election day. That would just cause a lot more provisional ballots and more work for the county clerks. However, I did come up with a solution for Senator McSorley. I said, if you are going to implement same-day registration, we can implement it currently in the state of New Mexico up to the last day of early voting. And the reason, because we're connected to the statewide voter registration system. We're currently, when somebody asks for an absentee ballot or they vote early at the early voting sites, they're immediately entered into the system. And on election night, after early voting closes on the Saturday, that evening we close the system and we run the rosters. And for election day, if you have already voted, it will say on the roster voted early or voted by absentee. And so that was one of the recommendations that I suggested, not up to election day, but up to the ending of early voting. But yes, if it will, I will support it if more people will come out to vote, and we will increase the ability of people to vote, because that is what my duty is as Secretary of State, to make sure that we make it convenient, accessible, and get the vote, make it easy for people to go out and vote. So yes.
No, I did not support it the last time it was brought up during legislative session, and I cannot see that today, in the situation we are in New Mexico today, with the way elections are handled and conducted currently right now, same-day registration does not make sense. It doesn't make sense in the sense that many New Mexicans feel that we already have voter fraud occurring in the state of New Mexico. If we implemented same-day registration in the way that it's been presented in the legislation that's been presented before us, it simply opens up the door and says someone from Arizona, someone from Texas could come in on election day, could register on that day, vote in Otero County, Doña County, at a precinct there, then simply leave back and go back to Texas or Arizona and vote again in that state. It opens up too many questions that still have to be answered as far as the legislation dealing with same-day registration. That's been an issue, Walt, that we've been dealing with in the legislature for many years. One of the things that I think the Secretary of State should be doing, I know that in the Secretary of State on their website, you can now go in and look at campaign finance reporting. However, for many years, it has not been an easy process and continues to be one of those problem areas that needs to be worked on. I have many, many people who have contacted me, both as a former county clerk, legislator, and now a candidate, who have said it's difficult. It's very difficult to be able to access. If I want to go back to 2006 or 2004 and see someone's campaign reports and see what lobbyist contributed to what candidate, it's a very difficult process to do. The Secretary of State should have a division and have competent people, professionals in the office who understand the average person at home wants to be able to easily access who is giving Diana Duran money for my campaign and who are these special interest groups, if any. There's a lot that needs to be said as far as the information on the reporting requirements, and we need to look at the legislation that specifies the information and make sure that that is also sufficient information for people to understand who those special interests might be.
Boy, what I have done. I actually I implemented a friendly new campaign financial reporting system with $176,500, and that is uncalled for. The state of Wyoming last legislative session approved a $2.5 million appropriation to implement a campaign financial reporting system, and that was the one promise that I made when I was running for office during my first term. I asked for an appropriation the first year. Second year, I really thought, well, wow, everybody says we need a new campaign financial reporting system, and I didn't receive the funds. So at the National Association of Secretary of States, I think I asked every single Secretary of State, what system do you have? I was just really looking into how am I going to implement a new campaign financial reporting system in the state of New Mexico. I didn't have the money, no one appropriated, no one carried a bill to help me out, but yet this was a big, big item when I ran the last time initiative. And so finally the state of Wyoming, I met with them. They actually been working on their campaign financial reporting system for 9 years. They've had several programmers, so that is, you know, when you add all of that up, that was in the millions of dollars. They allowed me to have their software if I paid for the license at $50,000. Worked out all the legalities, and it took months. It wasn't an overnight initiative or a task. And we have the Washington State system up and running now, and implemented it. I mean, that is really big. With $176,500, I have a new system now, and we're receiving a lot of good compliments, and people are, you know, the treasurers and the candidates, they're saying they love it. And as money comes available, I would love to continue enhancing it by getting the lobbyists to start filing and tying it in. I have an accounting background, so I'm a checks and balance person. I would love to have that system get to that point, and it will actually make your jobs a lot easier. People will be able to look up, and they can right now easily, where we receive our contributions. But that is one of my goals. In my second term, I will continue asking for funds or cutting in areas where I can continue to enhance that system, because that seems to be very important to New Mexico special interest groups, the media, and the public. They utilize that system quite often.